The gravestone was already there when I arrived. Half buried in the mud, covered in moss, and carved into the stone was my name, Ethan James. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it had to be some kind of prank. Then I saw the date underneath. My birth year was correct. The death date wasn't, because according to the stone, I was supposed to die the following night. I remember staring at it while cold rain dripped through the trees behind Jorce Park. The woods were completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then something moved behind me. Not close, not far either. Just close enough to make me realize I wasn't alone. I turned around. Nobody was there. But from somewhere deeper in the woods, a phone started ringing. An old ringtone. One I hadn't heard since my mother died. And that's when I made the mistake that changed everything. I followed it. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand something about me. This wasn't the first strange thing that happened after my mother died. Not even close. Looking back now, I think the grave was just the first thing I couldn't explain away. The first thing that forced me to stop lying to myself. Because grief makes people do strange things. It makes you hear voices, see patterns, convince yourself that impossible things have reasonable explanations. At least that's what I kept telling myself. My name is Ethan James. I'm 29 years old. I grew up in East Chicago, Indiana. If you've never been there, it's a place where steel mills, church steeples, old neighborhoods, and the cold winds coming off Lake Michigan somehow exist side by side. Most people pass through without noticing anything unusual. I used to think the same thing. Now I know better. Because some places hide things, and some places remember things, even when everyone else forgets. 3 months before I found the grave, my mother died. Cancer. Fast. Aggressive. The kind that takes someone away while you're still trying to convince yourself they're going to be okay. After the funeral, everything started falling apart. I stopped sleeping. I started hearing noises inside my apartment. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night convinced someone had spoken my name. Sometimes I could swear my mother was standing in the next room. Every time I checked, nobody was there. My best friend Marcus told me it was grief. He said I needed to get out of the apartment more. Most weekends we'd meet at Big Frank's Sausage, eat greasy food, talk about work, pretend life was normal. But there was one thing that always made Marcus uncomfortable. Whenever I mentioned my mother, or anything connected to my family history, his expression would change. Only for a second. But I noticed, and eventually, I started wondering why. The answer started 2 nights later. I was walking through Jorce Park after work. The lake was rough. The wind was brutal. The kind of cold that gets inside your jacket no matter what you're wearing. That's when I heard the ringing. An old flip phone. Somewhere inside the trees. I followed the sound off the trail, past wet leaves, past broken branches, until I found it lying in the mud. The screen was glowing, and the caller ID said only one word. M-O-M. I answered. At first, there was nothing, only static. Then my mother's voice whispered, "Don't let Marcus take you to the house." The call disconnected. And less than 24 hours later, Marcus showed up at my apartment and told me he had discovered something about my father, something hidden inside an old house in Marktown, a place called Riley House. A place my mother had spent years trying to keep me away from. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I agreed to go. Because, At the time, I had no idea the grave in the woods was waiting for me, or that somebody had already started digging it. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. Not work, not sleep, not even the constant noise coming from the warehouse floor. All I could think about was the phone call, my mother's voice, and the way Marcus had seemed almost too eager to get me inside the Riley house. By lunch, I had convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. By midnight, I was back in Marktown. The Riley house looked even worse in the dark. The old brick walls seemed black beneath the clouds. Every window reflected nothing but darkness. I parked across the street and went inside alone. Before returning, I'd spent hours researching old newspaper archives, missing persons records, property documents. At first, nothing made sense. Then a pattern appeared, a horrifying one. Every 100 years, almost exactly on schedule, young men vanished around East Chicago. No suspects, no bodies, no explanation. The strange part wasn't the disappearances. It was the names. Every single victim was named Ethan James. I checked the records 3 times, then 4. The names never changed. The oldest case dated back to the early 1800s. The newest was less than a century old. And all of them simply disappeared, as if the earth had swallowed them. The deeper I dug, the stranger things became. Some locals refused to talk entirely. One elderly man sitting outside a convenience store near Indianapolis Boulevard looked genuinely frightened when I mentioned Jorce Park. "The woods back there aren't natural anymore," he muttered. Another woman told me something even stranger. Some names belong to the ground. Then she walked away before I could ask what she meant. That fear stayed with me as I entered Riley House. The hallway was silent, too silent. I stared at the locked room upstairs. Last night, it had been sealed. Tonight, the door was standing open. Slowly, I stepped inside. A child's bedroom. Dust-covered wallpaper, old photographs, stacks of missing person flyers. Every boy looked disturbingly similar to me. Then I noticed the cracked mirror leaning against the wall. I looked into it, and my blood turned cold, because behind my reflection, standing directly behind me, was me, smiling. I spun around. Nobody was there. My hands were shaking when I spotted something hidden beneath the rusted crib. A diary. My mother's diary. I opened it. The final page contained a single sentence. "The woods choose one Ethan James every century." Attached beneath the writing was a hand-drawn picture. A grave. My grave. And beneath my name was next week's date. Moments like this make you realize how fragile life really is. And before we go any further, kindly like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Now let's get back to the story, because what I found on the next page was even worse. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned so fast I nearly dropped the diary. Marcus was standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I expected denial, excuses, anger. Instead, he looked relieved. like a man who had spent years carrying a secret and was finally too tired to keep holding it. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. Sorry for what? Marcus stepped into the room. For all of it, the words sounded rehearsed, like he'd known this moment was coming. Then he told me the truth, or at least part of it. The Riley family had lived in East Chicago long before the steel mills transformed the shoreline, long before the neighborhoods, long before the city itself existed. According to Marcus, something ancient lived beneath this land, something older than recorded history, something that should never have been disturbed. "The Riley house isn't haunted," he said. "It's a seal." I stared at him. A seal for what? His expression darkened. A doorway. The room suddenly felt colder. Marcus explained that every 100 years, the thing beneath East Chicago demanded a replacement. Not just anyone, not a random victim, a specific name. A specific bloodline. Mine, Ethan James, he whispered. Every century. The diary trembled in my hands. Then came the part that hurt the most. My mother had known. For decades. She had spent her life trying to protect me. Changing records. Destroying documents. Hiding evidence. Trying to break the cycle before it reached me. But cancer had killed her before she could finish. I wanted to believe Marcus was lying. Then he shattered the last piece of my trust. "You think I was helping you?" he asked, his eyes filled with guilt. "I was preparing you." The room seemed to tilt. "My family doesn't stop the ritual, Ethan." He swallowed hard. We completed. Every memory I had with him suddenly felt poisoned. Birthdays, road trips, late-night conversations, all of it. A lie. I ran. I don't remember leaving the house. Only the terror. The woods behind Jorce Park swallowed me whole. Shadows moved between the trees. Voices whispered from nowhere. Some sounded like strangers, others sounded dead. Then I heard my mother's voice screaming for help. I followed it deeper. The trees seemed to shift around me. Paths disappeared. Reality felt wrong. Broken. Then I saw the light. Dozens of candles burning in a perfect circle. In the center stood a fresh grave. The dirt was still wet. A coffin was already pushing through the earth. The gravestone read, Ethan James, 1995 2024. And standing behind it was my mother, wearing a white nightgown, perfectly still, watching me, her mouth sewn shut. Her mouth sewn shut. For a moment, I couldn't move. The woods had gone silent. Then the ground beneath my feet shifted. Roots began twisting through the mud like living snakes. The trees groaned. The air turned impossibly cold, colder than any Indiana winter I had ever experienced. Yet the circle of candles continued burning, their flames standing perfectly still despite the fierce wind coming off Lake Michigan. Then the coffin moved. Slowly. The lid creaked open. I wish I could tell you I looked away. I didn't. Inside was me. The same face, the same clothes, only dead. Pale skin stretched tightly across rotting flesh. Mud filled the corners of its eyes. Then those eyes opened. The corpse stared directly at me and smiled. "Get in," The voice was mine. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Before I could move, another figure stepped out from the darkness. Marcus. He was holding a shovel, and he was crying. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he whispered. The guilt in his face looked real. My family has done this for generations. If we don't give it what it wants, it takes someone else. "You were my friend," I said. His expression shattered. "I know." For the first time, he looked truly broken. Then my phone rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my skin. I looked at the screen. Mom. My hands shook as I answered. This time, there was no static. Only my mother's voice, clear, calm. "Ethan, listen carefully." Tears filled my eyes. "The thing can only take a name that is willingly given." "Redirect it." The call ended. Instantly, I understood. I looked at Marcus, the man who had spent years guiding me toward this moment, and I spoke his full name, Marcus Riley. Everything stopped. The wind, the whispers, the movement beneath the earth, silence. Then the gravestone cracked. The name changed. The coffin changed. The roots exploded from the ground. Marcus screamed. The shovel fell from his hands. The roots wrapped around his legs, waist, and chest before dragging him downward. "No!" he screamed. Then the earth swallowed him whole. Gone. The candles extinguished at once. The thing wearing my mother's face smiled and vanished. Police never found Marcus. The Riley house burned down before sunrise. Authorities called it an electrical fire. Nobody believed my story. Honestly, I don't blame them. But surviving something doesn't always mean you escaped it. If you loved this story, don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. We've got more powerful, emotional stories coming your way, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. 2 weeks later, I returned to Jorce Park. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof. The grave was there again. Fresh dirt, fresh flowers, fresh footprints. The stone once again read, Ethan James. But the death date had changed. Tomorrow. Again. Then I noticed something carved beneath it. Words that hadn't been there before. "We took the wrong one." And somewhere deep in the woods, something that sounded exactly like my own voice started calling my name.